For pretty much anyone who knows about DICE's Star Wars Battlefront II, there's a lot of baggage associated with that game. It was the successor to a game that was pretty universally praised as one of the best Star Wars games ever made, as well as the sequel to a pretty successful revival of the Battlefront IP. But as we all know, the launch was monumentally bad and sparked international debates over the legality of loot box style monetization, and it came out at a time when Star Wars fans were starting to diverge in opinion. I mean, well, okay, that has always happened. But it got especially bad around the time that Battlefront II came out. However, over time, a lot of the game's major problems were fixed, and huge props to the community manager Ben Walk and the whole team at DICE who actually listened to the criticism and sought to improve the game in any way they could. I'm not going to go into all of the improvements and added content that the game received because people have already made pretty extensive lists. But needless to say, the game has been completely overhauled and is in a much better place now. And for many people, myself included, the game is now one of their favorite Star Wars games, full stop. I personally list it among such massive hits as Knights of the Old Republic, the original Battlefront II by LucasArts and Pandemic, and even Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. They're great games, and the state Battlefront II is in now matches the quality of those games, in my opinion. With that said, it's pretty well known at this point that EA DICE has announced the end of live service added content for the game, at a time when people, I think, couldn't be more hungry for new content. It's important to note that they will continue to support the game with patches, but they will not be adding new content like heroes, maps, reinforcements, weapons, etc. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into a decision like this, and I'm not a market expert or a detective or a game developer, so I'm not going to try and decipher exactly why this is happening. I know they've said that a lot of that team is working on the next Battlefield game and all that stuff, but I don't know enough about all that. I'm not behind the scenes, so I'm not even going to try approaching that. But a lot of people are upset, and there's a petition, you've probably heard about it, that's about 75,000 signatures strong for DICE to continue supporting the game by making paid DLC, which is what they did for Battlefront 1. Or, you know what I mean, that Battlefront. But that kind of fractured the player base for that game. Some people had the DLC, other people didn't, and so you had this weird divide in the community between people who had the DLC and people who didn't, and it was harder to find games because of that. Nobody wants that. DICE knows that's bad. They're not going to do that. And to top it all off, EA and DICE, even the emeritus community manager, Ben Walk, they've basically said, no, we're not making paid DLC. We're not adding new content to this game. People are obviously upset about this, and they're continuing to push this big petition, but I think it's kind of a waste of time, because EA and DICE are not bluffing about this. They know that there is more demand for Battlefront content, and I'm all but certain they've at least drawn up plans to give fans more content, just not right away. The EA exclusive Star Wars contract ends in 2023. By that time, we'll have new consoles out, and it would be dumb for them not to make another Battlefront game for the next gen consoles. It's just science. But with that said, I have a theory/best case scenario that I'd like to present for your consideration, and it's probably the reason you clicked on the video. I believe that the best course of action would be for DICE to develop a new Battlefront game set entirely during the Clone Wars. Let's look at a few reasons why. Okay, there are two elephants in the room, very big elephants. Elephant number one. The Clone Wars just had its series finale, and it is currently the #1 original streaming series in terms of viewership, above The Mandalorian, above Stranger Things. Think of an original streaming series. All of them are being beaten by the Clone Wars right now. So that alone is enough to tell Disney and EA that people want more Clone Wars stuff. Elephant number two, this one's probably an even bigger elephant. Ahsoka Tano was far and away the most requested hero to be added to Battlefront 2 pretty much since launch. The whole community has wanted Ahsoka added to the game since the game came out. In fact, there were a lot of people that were hoping she would be in the game at launch. Obviously, we know that wasn't the case, and there were actually a lot of heroes missing, but I digress. So I don't think it's crazy to assume that they have at least drawn up plans for a Clone Wars exclusive Battlefront game. I don't think it's crazy to assume that they've even maybe started pre-production. And here's why I think they will approach this era exclusive concept. The first Battlefront that they made was exclusive to the Galactic Civil War, and it's still pretty highly regarded. And I think that's because it allowed them to go more in-depth with the era instead of spreading themselves thin across 3 different eras. There were a lot of characters missing from Battlefront 2 that were in Battlefront 1, like Dengar, Greedo, Nyanunba, whatever his name is, I can't pronounce it, Jyn Erso, Krennic. None of these heroes made it to Battlefront 2 because they had to focus on getting big, recognizable characters from across all 3 eras of Star Wars, and they weren't even able to do that in time for release. The only 2 Clone Wars characters we had, like Clone Wars exclusive characters, were Yoda and Darth Maul. That's it. What? And the only sequel era heroes we had were Rey and Kylo Ren. But I think focusing in on one era would give them a chance to really dive deep into that era and give fans a lot of characters that they've been requesting for a long time. Not just characters, but locations as well. The Clone Wars is rich with really cool environments and really interesting conflicts. But let's get into some specifics. What would a Star Wars Battlefront 3 set entirely during the Clone Wars look like? I've assembled a few lists of characters, locations, reinforcement types, and vehicles from the show and films set during the Clone Wars era that could be used for this hypothetical game. Most of these are off the top of my head. I did have to go to Wikipedia for a few like odds and ends, like specific names of things or like characters that I could remember their face and their role in the series, but I didn't remember their name, things like that. I didn't look up like a list of characters. I just rattled these off, and there could be plenty more locations and characters that I have not listed here. List them in the comments below. I'd like to see what you all think, starting with characters, because I know that's something that people care a lot about. Let's start with characters we already have in Battlefront 2 that could be moved over to Battlefront 3, and those are as follows: Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Darth Maul, Yoda, General Grievous, Count Dooku, Bossk, Chewbacca, and technically Palpatine, though I imagine in this version of the game he would have lightsabers, because that's kind of his thing during the Clone Wars era. But yeah, those are the characters we already have. But here is a list just mostly off the top of my head of characters who could be included in this hypothetical game, and it goes as follows in no particular order: Ahsoka Tano, Padme Amidala, Asajj Ventress, Hondo Ohnaka, Savage Opress, Mace Windu, Plo Koon, Captain Rex, Commander Cody, Cad Bane, Aurra Sing, Bo-Katan Kryze, Pre Vizsla, Zero the Hutt, just kidding, but that would be hilarious, Quinlan Voss, Mother Talzin, Aayla Secura, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Kit Fisto, Luminara Unduli, Shak Ti, Barriss Offee, Boba Fett pre-jetpack when he's still like a teenager running around with his band of bounty hunters, Greedo, yes, he is in the Clone Wars, Pong Krell, the bastard, the entire Bad Batch, although I want to put a little asterisk here. I think you could honestly make a game based entirely around the Bad Batch, like a Republic Commando style game set during like the transition from the Republic to the Empire. I think that would be sick. Just a thought. Just a thought. I also recognize that there are a ton of named clones that I have not listed here, like Fives and Heavy and, you know, all those guys. However, I feel like they would classify more as reinforcements of some kind. I think there are just too many for all of them to be playable heroes. It would be too hard to come up with a criteria for what separates a clone from being a hero character versus a reinforcement. And I'm not saying they aren't heroes in their own right, like emotionally, but in terms of gameplay, I don't know how many of them would classify as heroes versus just standard reinforcement types. But I'll get into that a little bit later. When we get to the reinforcements, I'll explain my thoughts on that a little more. There are also a handful of characters that were canonically dead during the Clone Wars themselves, but who could feasibly be included anyways because of their proximity to the era, and that would be Jango Fett, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Zam Wesell. There are probably others, But like Zam Wessel would be really interesting too, because she's a changeling. It would be kind of cool. I mean, there's actually another changeling in the Clone Wars series. I forget what her name is, but she helps Cad Bane break into the Jedi Temple. But it would be really interesting to play as a character who could mimic other people. Sort of a spy Team Fortress 2 style gameplay would be kind of interesting in a Battlefront game, but I digress. So there's a lot of characters to choose from here, right? There's no shortage of potential heroes for this game, but I'm actually really excited about locations. People have talked about characters to death when it comes to Battlefront. People all want their favorite character to be in the game, but I don't think a lot of people talk about locations because they don't realize how many cool freaking locations there are in the Clone Wars era. Here are the locations we already have: Kashyyyk, Kamino, Geonosis, Tatooine, Naboo, and Felucia. Here are some locations that we don't have yet, but could if this hypothetical game ever comes out: Christophsis, Ryloth, Mustafar, Coruscant, Umbara, Onderon, Mandalore, Ringo Vinda. It's that space station that orbits an entire planet where Tup follows Order 66 prematurely. RIP. Megiddo, Utapau, Dathomir, Cato Nemoidia, Florum, the pirate sanctuary, Citadel Station, the place where the Separatists keep Jedi. Anakin and co get in there by freezing themselves in carbonite to hide themselves from the life scanners or whatever. And Rishi Station, that's where the rookies were posted when they got attacked by commando droids, etc., etc., etc. There are a lot of locations in the Clone Wars. These are just off the top of my head, right? There are a ton more, and again, list your favorite locations in the comments. I'm personally a huge fan of the idea of an Umbara map. That would be so cool, although it would be really hard because nighttime maps are already very difficult to play in. All right, now we're on to reinforcements, and honestly, DICE have done a really good job of including reinforcement types, and there aren't too many that they've left out, but I have a thought on how they could expand on it even more. So here are the units we already have. I'm gonna include just the standard base units that are in Battlefront 2, the Assault, the Heavy, the Officer, and the Specialist, although they could shuffle things around or add new classes or whatever if they need to. And then we have the Clone Commandos, ARC Troopers, Jet Troopers, Commando Droids, Super Battle Droids, Rocket Droids, which are just Super Battle Droids with a jetpack, and Droidicas. Here are some reinforcements we don't have: Flame Troopers, Magna Guards, Pilots, the cooler Rocket Droids, Crab Droids, although those might classify as a vehicle, I'm not sure. Those weird spindly droids from the Bad Batch arc that can fly, that might be a little game-breaking, who knows. And aquatic or amphibious droids. And I want to make a note here. I think it would be really cool if they made more map-specific reinforcements or heroes, especially if you set things entirely in one era. I know people want to play their favorite hero all the time, and I think there are some heroes that should be available on multiple maps, but I think there should be some heroes and reinforcement types and vehicles that are only available on certain maps, and I think that would lend a level of immersion and fun, and you get into one map, you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna play this character, I'm gonna play one of these reinforcements or this vehicle, you know. You develop your favorite maps and stuff. But there are probably more reinforcement types that I'm missing. And admittedly, the droids have a lot more specialization of units, but I alluded to this earlier. I feel like this could be balanced out by including a bunch of unique clone characters as reinforcements. So the droids would have all these different, like, specialized droids to choose from, and then the clones would have specific characters with unique abilities that wouldn't classify as heroes necessarily. Their health pool wouldn't be that big. They wouldn't have the same kind of impact on the battlefield as, say, Anakin Skywalker or Ahsoka or Captain Rex, you know. Although, I guess Captain Rex is technically still just a clone, but he would need to be a hero, let's be honest. But a lot of the other secondary characters could just be one-off reinforcements, and you could have like a list of them. I think that would be interesting. All right, now we're on to vehicles. And vehicles is an area where I feel like the game has a lot of room for improvement, not in terms of the number of vehicles included, but in terms of the gameplay of vehicles. They need by far the biggest overhaul out of anything in Battlefront, because most of the vehicles in the game really suck or just are impossible to effectively use due to map design. Like, try using one of the tanks on Felucia and tell me how that goes. Try using any of the speeders in the game and tell me how that goes. That needs fixing, like big time, before we even consider this. Now, the flying vehicles are great, most of them. I do have a few gripes, but let's go on to the list. Here are the vehicles we already have. The LAAT, although technically it's just like a chopper gunner, I would want it to be a troop transport. That would be awesome, like a carrier chopper type situation. That would be badass. I need that in my life. The MTT, although that's like a scripted thing, it's also on rails. Again, it could be cool if it were pilotable. ATRTs, they actually work fairly well, I'm gonna be honest. They work okay. The AAT, the ATTE, which is fully pilotable, which is great. The TX-130 tank, that's a friggin' throwback. I love that they included this. I mean, even though it was much later on, but yes. The STAP, the Bark Speeder, which is, I hate using it. The ARC 170, the V-Wing, the Y-Wing, the Vulture Droid, the Tri-Fighter, the Hyena Bomber, and N1 Starfighters, which are map specific to Naboo. And then we have some hero ships. So we have Yoda's Jedi Starfighter, we have Darth Maul's Scimitar, and we have Slave One, although technically it's Boba Fett's Slave One. We could have it be like Aurra Sing's Slave One or Jango Fett's or something like that. Here are some vehicles we don't have. The Spider Droid, as well as the Dwarf Spider Droid, the Hailfire Droid, which was in the original Battlefront II, and it's awesome. You can see them in the background on Geonosis in the new game, but I want to pilot one. The NR-N99 Tank Droid, also known as the Persuader. I really like these things. The HMP Gunship, which we have a model of, but it isn't usable as a vehicle in the game. The Z-95, which is the predecessor to the ARC 170, and I guess the X-Wing, but why not include it? It's cool. The V-19 Torrent Starfighter. I was actually surprised at how often these things show up in the Clone Wars. Yeah, they're everywhere. Baron Starfighters, again, a map-specific vehicle type. The Comerc class or Gauntlet Fighters, they're the Mandalorian ones with the spinning wings. Rogue class / Magna Guard Fighters, you see these a few times in the Clone Wars. Kind of look like Grievous's ship. Geonosian Starfighters, these should also be map-specific. Usable turbo tanks. Could you imagine having a usable turbo tank in Battlefront? Like the Elephant in Halo 3, but faster and with giant freaking rocket launchers on the side. Like, that'd be awesome. And then for hero ships, we have basically any and all other Jedi Starfighters. It would also be really cool if they included the Delta class ones from Episode 2. Grievous's Belblab 22 Starfighter. I had to look that up. Incidentally, this was the ship model that was used in the old Battlefront 2 for the CIS bombers. Hyenas didn't exist at the time. I think they were added in Clone Wars. And then we also have Asajj Ventress's Fanblade Starfighter. I don't know what it's called, but it's pretty cool looking, etc., etc. There are a lot of vehicles. I didn't include any of the Umbaran like insect tanks or anything like that, but those would be cool as well. The Defoliator tank, you know, a lot of cool stuff. So this video is already getting pretty long, so I'm gonna stop here. But basically, just imagine all of these things that I've listed in a Battlefront game. That's what I'm hoping for. I don't know if this is what's gonna happen. Again, I'm not a market expert, I am not an insider, I have no connections to EA or DICE other than I play their games. The decent ones. And I really hope that this has at least been considered. I hope this is on the table. But I want to know what you guys think. What would you like to see in a Battlefront 3 set entirely during the Clone Wars? Were there any locations I missed? Were there any vehicles I missed? Characters? Reinforcement types even? Are there any particular weapons? Because I didn't talk about weapons. Were there certain weapons that you would want to see in the game as a standard reinforcement? That could be its own video, honestly. Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. This is the first video I've made in like 10 years, but if this does well, I would definitely like to start making videos again and probably do it more regularly. So if you subscribe and hit the bell icon, you can expect more. Stay safe, and may the Force be with you. But let's get into some... Ooh. There we go.